A widowed millionaire saw a nanny comforting his children. What happened next changed everything. David Miller, 42 years old, was a familiar name in the renewable energy business world of New York. To the outside world, he was a successful man, living in the top floor of a Manhattan glass tower, always surrounded by meetings and million-dollar contracts. But inside, David was a hollow man, his heart frozen in pieces ever since the day his wife died. 3 years earlier, an accident had taken away the woman he loved most, leaving him alone with 2 children, far too young to understand such loss. Ethan was only 5 at the time, and Olivia had just turned 2. That death didn't just take away a wife and a mother, it stole the laughter from their home. The $6 million penthouse, once bright and luxurious, now stood silent like a mausoleum. Ethan grew up withdrawn, avoiding eye contact with anyone, while Olivia cried nearly every day, repeating the same question. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming back?" No answer could stop her from searching. Over those 3 years, David had hired 17 different nannies. Some lasted a few days, others a few weeks. But in the end, all of them left. Ethan and Olivia rejected any substitute, refusing to eat, refusing to play, living inside a grief so heavy it suffocated the air. David tried everything: psychologists, therapists, even luxury trips from Central Park to Disney World. But nothing worked. The wound was too deep, the emptiness too wide. As a last attempt, he hired Mrs. Peterson, the 18th nanny, a woman in her 50s, always dressed neatly, speaking in strict tones. To David, she seemed professional, punctual, writing schedules, enforcing rules. But to Ethan and Olivia, Mrs. Peterson felt more like a warden than a caregiver. She cared more about keeping the apartment tidy than about the children's breaking hearts. Ethan and Olivia sat still for hours, glued to cartoons playing on repeat, while Mrs. Peterson only demanded silence. The house, already empty, grew even heavier, like a fog of sorrow clinging to every wall. David watched helplessly. He buried himself in 16-hour workdays, not because he needed more money, but because he feared facing the pain in his own living room. The noise of the office was easier than Olivia's muffled sobs or the vacant stare in Ethan's eyes. It was a rainy Monday morning in New York when Grace Johnson first stepped into the Miller family's life. The doorbell rang sharply at 7 a.m., and when David opened it, he saw only a thin woman with her hair tied back, dressed in a faded blue uniform. On her shoulder hung an old canvas bag filled with cleaning supplies, a few bottles, a rag, and a small broom. To David, she looked no different from the temporary housekeepers he cycled through every month. But he didn't know that this simple woman carried inside her a story heavier than any suitcase. Grace had been a devoted kindergarten teacher for 15 years, a graduate of the University of Tennessee. She once taught children how to tie their shoes, count the clouds outside the window, and dream of bright tomorrows with her own little girl. But 2 years earlier, a car accident had taken her daughter's life. Since then, Grace could no longer set foot inside a classroom. The sound of children's laughter pierced her like an unhealed wound. To escape her memories, she left her hometown, moved to New York, and took any work that could cover a rented room and a modest meal. On her first day in the Miller penthouse, David rushed off early to work, leaving his children with Mrs. Peterson. Ethan sat motionless on the sofa, eyes glued to a cartoon looping endlessly. Olivia curled up in the corner, her small shoulders trembling with sobs. In the kitchen, Mrs. Peterson cooked while talking on the phone, complaining that rich kids are impossible to handle. Grace, sweeping the floor, heard the muffled cries. She set the broom aside and slowly walked over. Kneeling to meet Olivia's eyes, she asked softly, "Sweetheart, what's making you so sad today?" Olivia looked up, red-eyed, startled. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with such tenderness. She whispered, "I want my mom." Grace's heart clenched. Her own loss surged back like an old wave, but instead of avoiding it, she gently replied, "I once lost the daughter I loved most. I miss her every day, but I discovered that when we share the good memories, the sadness becomes a little lighter." Ethan, who had been silent, turned suddenly. "You lost someone too?" Grace nodded, her eyes filled with sincerity. "Yes, and I believe that every time we do something kind for others, the ones we love in heaven smile at us." The two children stayed quiet, listening intently, as if for the first time someone truly understood their pain. Just then, Mrs. Peterson entered the room, frowning. "Ms. Johnson, you're here to clean, not to talk to the children." Grace bowed her head, picked up the broom, and continued working. But Olivia quietly tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Don't go." Grace smiled, brushing the girl's hair back. "I'm still here. If you need me, just call." Throughout the morning, as Grace cleaned, she felt the children's eyes following her. When she wiped the bookshelf, Olivia approached and asked, "What was your daughter like?" Grace paused, her gaze distant, then smiled with gentle sadness. "She was a lot like you. Long hair, loved dolls, and always begged for bedtime stories." Olivia hesitated. "Do you know how to tell stories?" "I know plenty. Would you like to hear one?" Before Olivia could answer, Mrs. Peterson cut in. "Enough, Olivia. Let her work. Go watch TV." But Olivia stood her ground. Ethan left the sofa and joined her. Grace thought for a moment, then smiled. "How about I tell you a story while I clean? That way I work and you have fun." And so the magic began. The rag in her hand became a magic wand. The vacuum turned into a dust monster catcher. The tale of a princess who lost her crown included two little heroes, Ethan and Olivia. For the first time in months, laughter rang through the cold penthouse. Ethan bombarded her with questions about the dragon, while Olivia clapped in delight as Grace growled like the villain. Mrs. Peterson frowned at the scene, clearly displeased. But even she couldn't deny that in just one morning, this woman in a faded uniform had done what no one had managed in 3 years: awaken the buried smiles of two grieving children. That afternoon, David decided to come home earlier than usual. He had canceled a meeting out of exhaustion, bracing himself for the familiar scene. 2 silent children, Mrs. Peterson grumbling, and an apartment heavy as a graveyard. But the moment he opened the door, he heard a sound his heart had almost forgotten: children's laughter echoing through the living room. David froze. He followed the sound, and the sight before him was unbelievable. Olivia was standing on a chair holding a rag, stretching toward a painting on the wall. Grace stood right beside her, one arm wrapped securely around the girl's back to keep her steady. Ethan crouched under the coffee table, eagerly sweeping with a small broom. And all three were singing an improvised tune, calling themselves the Super Cleaning Team, describing how they were saving the house from the kingdom of mess. The children's faces glowed, lit up like sunlight streaming through glass. David felt as if he had been transported back in time to the days when his wife was alive and their home overflowed with laughter. He stood still at the doorway. Olivia suddenly spotted him and squealed, "Daddy, you're home! I'm helping Ms. Grace clean the house. She said I'm her special assistant." Ethan dashed over, hugging his father. "Dad, Ms. Grace knows so many stories. She told us Mom is still proud of us in heaven." At those words, David's throat tightened. For the first time in 3 years, his children spoke of their mother with joy instead of tears. Meanwhile, Grace hurriedly set down her rag and bottle, stepping back with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I shouldn't have let them join in. They insisted, and I couldn't say no." David looked at his children clinging to him, then at the woman bowing her head in shame. He could feel the shift in the air of his home. What had been suffocating was now filled with life. He said gently, "If there's a mistake here, it's mine, for failing to find a way to make my children smile. In 3 hours, you've done what dozens of nannies couldn't in 3 years." Just then, Mrs. Peterson appeared, purse in hand, her voice sharp. "Mr. Miller, I need a word. This woman has spent the entire day disrupting routine, making up nonsense games, confusing the children. Wealthy kids need discipline, not fantasies and childish play." David turned to her, calm but firm. "In the 2 months you've worked here, have you once seen my children truly smile?" Mrs. Peterson fell silent. He continued, "Did they eat well today?" "Yes, but—" David cut her off. "Maybe the problem is exactly that. They don't need someone to impose rules. They need to be treated as children, not as an elite class. And I believe your time here has come to an end." He paid her full month's salary and showed her to the door. That evening, for the first time in 3 years, David sat at the dinner table with his children without tears or suffocating silence. His heart trembled, yet carried a fragile spark of hope. Perhaps a real miracle was already taking root inside this very home. That night, for the first time in 3 years, the children went to sleep without crying. Olivia asked her father to braid her hair the way her mother used to. Ethan demanded that his father tell a story in the cheerful tone that Miss Grace had taught him. David was stunned to realize that while he had been busy working to forget his pain, it was the simplicity and love of a stranger that had helped him see what truly mattered. The next morning, David canceled all his morning appointments to wait for Grace. When he heard the doorbell, he opened the door himself. Grace was surprised to see the homeowner at home and asked anxiously, "Is something wrong, sir? Are the children okay?" David smiled. "They're wonderful. In fact, since yesterday, they haven't stopped talking about you. I'd like to have a private conversation." He invited Grace into the living room and spoke directly. "I need to understand how, in just a few hours, you managed to do what no nanny in years has been able to accomplish. Since yesterday, the children have eaten properly, gone to sleep without crying, and for the first time in 3 years, mentioned their mother without breaking down. What did you do?" Grace looked uneasy, thinking she was being reprimanded. I just treated them like normal children. I listened, let them help me, told them a few stories." David pressed further. "How did you know to do that? Do you have children?" Grace lowered her eyes, her voice breaking. "I once had a daughter. She died in a car accident 2 years ago. Before that, I had been a preschool teacher for 15 years. Hearing this, David fell silent. He realized that the humble woman before him not only understood children through her profession, but also knew the pain of loss, just like him and his children. He spoke softly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. But that's why you understand their sadness." After a moment of silence, David continued, "Would you like to work here every day? Not just cleaning, but also caring for the children?" Grace was astonished. "But you already have a nanny?" David shook his head. "I let her go. And I've realized that what my children need is not someone who keeps a strict schedule, but someone who truly cares for them." Grace was moved but still hesitant. "I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but I don't have any nanny certificates nor recommendations from wealthy families." David smiled. "Grace, what you have is worth more than any certificate. You made my children truly laugh, and that is priceless." Then he made an offer that left Grace stunned. "I will pay you $5,000 a month to both care for the children and manage the household tasks. If you'd like, you can move into the staff room right here in the house." Grace was overwhelmed. That amount was twice what she earned cleaning multiple houses at once, and it came with stable housing. But more than that, she felt she could be useful again, helping 2 children who had unknowingly touched her heart. Through her tears, she agreed. In the days that followed, life in the house changed completely. Grace woke up at 6 in the morning, preparing breakfast for the children by turning every dish into a magical story. She helped them get dressed with cheerful songs, turning every daily task into a game. Olivia and Ethan began to wake up eagerly, waiting to see what new trick Miss Grace would come up with. David, who used to rush out of the house to avoid the sadness, now lingered for a few extra minutes just to watch his children laugh. He realized that Grace had a special gift, the ability to turn ordinary things into magic. Brushing teeth became the battle against the cavity monsters. Cleaning the room turned into the game of finding a home for each object. Bath time became the adventure of warriors discovering a waterfall. What impressed David most was the way Grace handled the children's sadness when they missed their mother. Instead of distracting them, she sat down and encouraged them to talk about her. What did your mom love doing the most? Which memory makes you the happiest? Then she listened attentively, helping them transform their longing into sweet memories instead of just sorrow. A week later, David came home from work and witnessed a scene that brought tears to his eyes. Olivia was sitting on Grace's lap on the sofa while she braided her hair into little plaits, exactly the way her mother used to. Ethan sat beside them, choosing colorful ribbons. Olivia laughed brightly. "Miss Grace, my mom used to braid my hair like this too. You must have learned it from her, right?" Grace stroked the girl's hair and replied gently, "No, sweetheart, but I believe all mothers know how to do that, because love teaches us special things. Your mother surely left a little piece of her love in this space, so others could care for you with all their hearts." Olivia hugged Grace tightly and whispered, "You take care of us just like Mom did." Grace choked up, "And you two take care of my heart just like my daughter once did." David stood behind the door, quietly watching, and for the first time since losing his wife, he broke down in tears. But they were no longer tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. He thought to himself, God sent an angel in the form of a housekeeper to heal this family's heart. That night, after the children had gone to bed, David invited Grace to sit and talk. He spoke with deep emotion. "I need to thank you, not just for your work, but because you've given my children back to me. They can be children again, laugh again, and mention their mother without despair. You've worked a miracle in this home." Grace smiled humbly. "Sir, it's I who should be grateful. Caring for Ethan and Olivia is also healing my own heart. Every time I see them happy, I feel my daughter smiling from heaven." David was silent for a moment, then made a surprising decision. "Grace, I want to raise your salary to $10,000 a month. And one more thing, I want you to have dinner with us every day, not as an employee, but as a member of this family. To the children, you're already their second mother. To me, you are the most important person who has entered our lives in the past 3 years." Grace was moved to tears. "Mr. David, you don't need to do that. Taking care of the children is already a privilege." David looked straight into her eyes. "Not a privilege, Grace. It's what you deserve. You deserve more than anything I could ever give, because you've given us something money can never buy, the return of joy." From that conversation onward, Grace was no longer just a housekeeper. She became David's confidant whenever he felt uncertain about raising the children. She was the one Olivia turned to for girlish secrets, and she was the only person who could get Ethan to do his homework, turning studying into a fun game. David began coming home earlier just so he wouldn't miss the moments Grace created for the children. One Saturday morning, David was in his study when Olivia's terrified scream came from the kitchen. "Ms. Grace, hurry! Ethan fell down." David rushed downstairs. The sight froze his blood. Ethan lay sprawled on the kitchen floor, face pale, breath shallow. Beside him, Grace knelt calmly, her hands checking his chest for each breath and heartbeat. "Mr. Miller, Ethan is having a severe allergic reaction. He must have eaten something with shrimp or seafood. We need to get him to the hospital now." David panicked, scooping his son into his arms, but it was Grace who stayed calm. "You drive. I'll call emergency and keep Ethan stable." Even as she spoke, she dialed quickly, giving precise details. Then she applied first aid, tilting Ethan to his side to help him breathe. While David drove, trembling like in a nightmare, Grace sat in the back, holding Ethan and soothing Olivia, who sobbed uncontrollably. "Your brother will be okay, Olivia. Breathe with me. 1, 2, that's it. He's strong. He'll make it through." At the hospital, doctors rushed Ethan into the ER. David stood shaking, paralyzed by fear. Grace stayed beside him, steady and calm. "Trust me, he'll pull through. The signs are better thanks to the first aid." An hour later, the doctor emerged to announce Ethan was out of danger. He had suffered a severe shrimp allergy, but timely first aid had saved his life. When Ethan awoke, the first person he reached for was not his father, but Grace. His voice was faint. "Miss Grace, you saved me?" Grace held his hand, eyes glistening. "No, sweetheart. God saved you. I just helped a little." Olivia clung to Grace's arm. "Daddy, Miss Grace is a real superhero. She knows everything, and she saved Ethan." David watched, tears brimming again. He turned to Grace, voice choked. "Today you didn't just care for my son, you saved his life. I don't know how to thank you." Grace only shook her head. "Anyone who loved these children would have done the same. I only did what a mother would do." But David knew not everyone could stay so calm, so strong, so full of love. In that moment, he realized one thing for certain. He could trust Grace with his children's very lives. After the hospital incident, David began to look at Grace differently, not just as someone caring for his children, but as an extraordinary woman who had transformed his entire family. During dinners, he started talking to her more, asking about her life, her dreams, and her interests. He discovered that Grace loved reading, had been the first in her family to go to college, and had once dreamed of pursuing graduate studies in education. The more he listened, the more David admired her. In Grace, he saw not only simplicity, but also intelligence, determination, and a beautiful soul. As for Grace, she also began to see David differently. No longer as a wealthy, distant employer, but as a devoted father, trying his best to be both mom and dad. She noticed how moved he was when he saw his children laugh, how grateful he was for every small thing she did. Gradually, her heart, closed after her loss, began to open again. 3 months after Grace arrived, David did something that surprised everyone. He canceled a business trip to Paris, an agreement that could have brought in millions, just to attend Olivia's piano recital at school. When Grace asked why, he smiled. "You've taught me that some things are more important than money. Hearing my daughter play the piece her mother once loved is worth more than any contract." It was Grace who had encouraged Olivia to return to the piano and who discovered the girl's musical talent. Thanks to her encouragement, Olivia practiced joyfully and shone in the recital. Ethan also changed. From a withdrawn boy, he became lively, curious, and eager to help Grace around the house. Both children seemed reborn. David knew it was all thanks to the woman who had entered their lives like a miracle. At that recital, while Olivia was playing a piece her mother had once loved, she suddenly stopped, looked down at the audience, and saw David and Grace sitting side by side. She spoke into the microphone. "I dedicate this piece to my mom in heaven, to my dad, the most wonderful father, and to my second mom, Miss Grace, who taught me that love never disappears. It only changes form." The entire hall fell silent with emotion. David and Grace were overwhelmed, unable to speak. On the way home, Olivia suddenly asked, "Dad, why don't you marry Miss Grace? Then she would be our real mom and never leave us." Ethan quickly agreed. "That's right, Dad. Miss Grace already takes care of us like a mother. She lives with us, loves us. All that's missing is the paper." David blushed, flustered, not knowing what to say. Grace gently answered, "My dears, I love you more than anything, but marriage is a complicated matter between adults." Olivia interrupted, "But you and Dad take care of each other, you like talking to each other, and you both love us. Isn't that what's needed to get married?" That night, after the children had gone to bed, David and Grace had the most important conversation of their lives. David looked into her eyes and confessed, "Grace, over these past months, you haven't just cared for my children. You've healed me. You've taught me how to be a father again, shown me what truly matters. And I've fallen in love with you." Grace was silent for a moment, then softly replied, "David, when I first came here, I felt dead inside. Losing my daughter made me think I could never live again. But caring for Olivia and Ethan brought me back to life. And you've shown me that I can love again. I love you too." David took her hand, his heart racing. "Our story began in such an unusual way. You came here as a cleaner, and I was a cold, distant man. But you saved my family, and you taught me what true love is. Grace, will you marry me? Not because the children want it, but because I love you and want to spend my life with you." With tears in her eyes, Grace nodded. "David, 4 months before I rang the bell of this house, I never thought I would find family, love, and a new life again. Yes, I will." They embraced, and for the first time since losing his wife, David felt his heart fully healed. On the wedding day, Grace wore a pure white dress, simple yet elegant. Olivia was the little bridesmaid, radiant in her pink dress. Ethan, the ring-bearer, looked handsome in his tiny suit. David stood waiting at the garden aisle, and the moment he saw Grace appear, tears filled his eyes. As she drew near, he whispered, "You're so beautiful, my wife." She smiled, "And you too, my husband." The priest officiating the ceremony was the same one who had baptized Olivia and Ethan. He said, "David and Grace are living proof that true love can bloom in the most unexpected circumstances. They met when both were broken, and together they built a new family founded on love, respect, and care for one another." When it was time to recite the vows, David looked deeply into Grace's eyes. "I promise to love you not only in days of joy, but also in times of hardship. I promise to cherish your strength, your wisdom, and your endless love. I promise to be the man you deserve, the father our children need, and your companion in every journey. You taught me that true wealth is not found in money, but in love. I love you more than my very life." Grace trembled as she replied, "I promise to love you with all my heart, just as I love Olivia and Ethan. I promise to stand by your side in joy and in sorrow. I promise to care for our family as a treasure, and I promise to be the mother your children deserve, always honoring the memory of their birth mother while giving them all the love within me." When the priest said, "Now you may kiss," David and Grace kissed beneath a shower of rose petals tossed by Olivia and Ethan. The guests burst into applause, but the most moving moment came when the two children ran to embrace them both, forming a perfect circle of family. The reception that followed was simple, yet filled with warmth. David spoke. "A year ago, I was a man who had lost everything, burying myself in work. My house was cold, my children were sad. But God sent an angel in the form of a housekeeper to knock on my door. Grace not only healed my children, but also healed me. She taught me that true happiness isn't about how much money you have, but about how much love you give and receive." Grace also gave a speech. "When I lost my daughter, I thought my life had ended. I came to New York only to survive. But the day I rang the bell of this house, I never imagined it was the door to a new home. David, Olivia, and Ethan saved my life, and today I am happy to call them my family. Olivia and Ethan had even prepared a special performance. Olivia played on the piano a piece she had composed herself, Family of the Heart, while Ethan recited a poem he had written about how Miss Grace transformed their lives. Not a single eye at the wedding stayed dry. Their honeymoon was unlike any other couple's. David decided to take Olivia and Ethan along, saying, "We began this journey together, so we'll continue it together." The destination was Disney World, the dream Olivia had often mentioned. This time, unlike past trips overshadowed by sadness, the journey was filled with laughter. Olivia hugged her father and whispered, "Daddy, before, every vacation made me cry because I missed Mom. But now I'm not sad anymore because I know she's happy in heaven seeing that I have Mom Grace by my side." Ethan added, "That's right. Now we have two moms, one in heaven and one right here." As time passed, the Miller family lived in simple but lasting happiness. David was no longer a businessman consumed by work, but a devoted husband and father. Grace, once a grieving woman, found new meaning in life through the love and laughter of two children. Ethan and Olivia grew up in a home overflowing with affection, learning that family is not only built by blood, but by choice and love. Each evening, laughter filled the penthouse. Each morning, sunlight through the windows warmed not just the home, but the hearts of everyone inside. And so, one ordinary knock on the door opened an extraordinary story, a story of loss and healing, of love reborn where no one expected it. The Millers lived happily ever after, proving that miracles do exist through love. The Millers lived happily ever after, proving that miracles do exist through love.